What's up, board fam? Eric here. It's time for another AMA video. That means you get to ask me anything anonymously. And if you would like to participate in this video series, all you have to do is go down to the description box below and click on the link and leave your question or comment there. We're going to do 5 here, and then any remaining comments or questions will be consolidated into a separate video for members only. If you would like to see those videos, you can become a channel member by clicking join or the plus button, selecting your tier. All tiers have access to bonus videos. Select your tier to support the channel that way, and you get to see the bonus content. It is really that easy. Let's go ahead and get into the first question. Hey, Eric, what do you think about people using buzzwords like overproduced, faux maximalist, soulless Israeli slop to say something is bad when they have or have not consumed the media that's being presented that they don't like, and it is the same thing that the chuds say, like woke/DEI, because I feel like it's the same thing they do but different. There's an artist called Aquatica. I don't really know anything about this person, Aquatica, so I'm really not going to give too much response to that because I don't know. This is what people typically do on social media when they react to stuff. They just react to things without understanding what it is they're reacting to. So unfortunately, I don't know a lot about this situation. So it's going to be hard for me to give any sort of feedback on that. Also, Eric, I remember you doing a fan film reaction before, so I think if you wanted, you could react to The Vanisher, Horizon Scraper, I Didn't Mean to Haunt You visual album movies by Aquatica, and he will not copyright if you do react. He doesn't do that sort of stuff. And then you're mentioning some other content of his to check out. I'll check all this out after I record this video, simply because I just haven't had time to do it before answering your question. But thank you for bringing this to my attention, and thank you for your comment. What's so hilarious is SnarkyJay is half Cuban and Puerto Rican and lives in Orlando. I had no idea. I didn't know that. Some people were mentioning it in my comment section, but before I ever even reacted to her videos, I knew very little about her personal background. And I've been doing that on purpose. I've been trying to go into new reactions knowing as little about that person's personal background as possible when I react to one of their videos, so I could just focus on what they're saying in the video. So that's really funny. She mentions it pretty much every 3 to 5 videos and in her F&Q videos. I wonder how she feels with her friend Will Jordan and Gary and the other bigot racists she streams with every now and then, what they say about Bad Bunny this past week. LOL, she's such a sellout and grifter. It's sad. So one of the things, I said this many times before, but I guess I'm going to keep talking about this because I think it's important, is a lot of people who are of a marginalized community cozy up to white supremacy because they feel like they're protected by that. And they can use that as a shield, so when people come for their community, they can go, hey, I'm one of the good ones. I'm friends with the white supremacist people. They're my buddies. But if history has told us anything, that doesn't actually work. That's not something that actually works like they think it is. But people still continue to do it because they are very ignorant to history and how pick-me's and sellouts get treated once everybody else is dealt with. When they go through and they systemically eliminate in media and movies and TV shows, and then possibly even worse than that, they will get to a point where there's none of their ops left to eliminate, so they have to start coming for anyone that is left. So they might not get you in the beginning, but they're going to get around to you eventually. And we see this already. There's regret for Trump voting in places like Florida from people whose family members, spouses, boyfriends, girlfriends, loved ones who are of Cuban descent or are from Cuba that are getting picked up and treated like trash by the Trump administration. So it's already happening. It's happening right now. So it's just kind of stupid to be a pick-me and a sellout at this point. Anyway, thank you for your comment. I appreciate it. Hey, Eric, this is sort of my part 2 of my lengthy question on Star Trek. That's okay. Most passionate Trekkies preferred the Rick Berman era of TNG, DS9, Voyager, Enterprise over Paramount Plus Kurtzman's Trek. I don't know if I would agree with that statement, only because there's no way to gauge that. Like, what are we using as a metric? Just online discourse? I don't think that's the right way. Are we using viewership? Because we're talking about 2 different types of ways that media is presented to us. We're talking about like regular network television episodes over 20 some weeks or whatever versus the online streaming stuff, which is much shorter. I don't know. It's really hard to determine what the quote unquote most passionate Trekkies would prefer. It really is tough because online discourse is very disingenuous. Fans felt the Berman era had a better quality of writing, the tone of optimism, and intellectual and adventurous exploration of the human condition, and cast of characters was considered stronger and more compelling. I mean, it's easier to do that when you have more episodes to play with. I will say that. I think the length of time we spend with characters does determine how much we identify with them. And so the issue, what we're hitting a wall on is people that watched 20-some episodes of Trek over 7 seasons versus a new generation of people that like TikTok and Instagram Reels and stuff who are watching shorter seasons and becoming connected to those characters in a shorter amount of time. It's just harder for people who have watched older content to have that connection because the cast is still as large, but you're getting much, much less time with those characters. I think that is one of the big issues, and I hope that they will eventually do some sort of a study on that because that's just my opinion. Let's see. Discovery and Star Trek Picard felt more like a dystopian science fiction or science fantasy filled with intense action, forgetful characters, and more pessimism rather than optimism. That's more about the era that we're in than Star Trek as a franchise. I think the issue is that we went through Battlestar Galactica, right? You remember that show, Battlestar Galactica? That changed the game of what sci-fi is. Then you have stuff like The Expanse, and you have all of these shows where it's like the future isn't always going to be, optimistic. And I think what Star Trek tried to do, or at least the newer Star Trek tried to do, is they tried to incorporate some of that in their shows. Because optimism, if you look at it, like, think about this. Star Trek Starfleet Academy is a pretty optimistic show. Even though they have drama and they have issues in it, the show itself feels optimistic to me. I would say something like Lower Decks felt very optimistic to me. Even Prodigy, to some degree, pushed on optimism. Strange New Worlds also does feel quite optimistic. So yeah, you're using Discovery and Picard as a dystopian story or dystopian series. And I wouldn't argue that they're not. I think there was a lot of that in those shows. But they're 2 of like 7 new Star Trek shows that have been out that do focus on that. So I think it's a little weird to like classify all of the newer Trek as pessimistic instead of optimistic because of two shows in that particular series of shows. Seth MacFarlane's The Orville, which by the way, I love that show. I love Orville, appeared to fill the void that fans wanted. Though it was a Star Trek parody, it became more popular with Trekkies than actual modern Star Trek. And that should tell you exactly what we're dealing with here, right? The Orville took existing concepts and ideas from older Star Trek. It made it a parody, and then it did not take itself seriously in the vast majority of episodes that came out. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it was actually a show based on nostalgia. It wasn't doing anything new. The Orville was not presenting new concepts and ideas in their media. They were just repeating stuff from previous iterations of Star Trek. And that's okay. It's absolutely fine. I like The Orville. I think it's really good. But The Orville wasn't a continuation of Star Trek. It was a regression of what Star Trek is, with humor thrown into it. So if you want something new, something that does sort of feel like it's in today's media, what you're getting is that newer Star Trek stuff. What the Orville, your comparison to the Orville here tells me that you don't want new Star Trek. You want a paint job on old Star Trek. And that's fine. But that's not really what's happening with newer Star Trek shows. The closest thing to what this is would be Strange New Worlds, which is a show that does sort of feel nostalgic, but also does dip its toes into the newer era of TV and stuff like that. And it kind of has to because we're stuck on the streaming thing, which is less episodes, less time with characters. Some fans were calling it real Star Trek because it carried the traditional Trek tone and dealt with social political topics as well as the moral, philosophical questions explored in traditional Trek. And by the way, it also dealt with things like racism and sexism and homophobia. Those things were present in the Orville, but most people would deny it. They wouldn't call it woke or DEI just because it was traditional Star Trek wrapped up in a new paint job. And they couldn't do that because that would call their bluff. Fans complained that through Kurtzman's Trek carried the social and political messaging that made Star Trek progressive through the 60s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. It lacked the more complex moral philosophical topics that made the franchise so sophisticated. You know why? The vast majority of the episodes that dealt with those kinds of topics were considered bottle episodes. So they were episodes where the story it started and ended in the same episode. You don't really get that in the newer stuff because they have less episodes. So what happens is they want to take those lessons that we would have learned in a bottle episode and they incorporate them into the larger story, and that's why people have an issue with it. They don't like the idea that these kinds of social messages get wrapped up in the main story for the season, but because of the way shows are structured now, they have no other avenue to do it except that way, because that's the only way it can be done. That's the only way it can happen in modern TV, because you don't get enough episodes to do it. So this was just simply personal taste, or to set that Farland have a better sense of fan expectations over Paramount. Sorry there. No, I kind of explained all of it here. So Orville was a parody of old Trek with a new paint job, recycling ideas and concepts from old Trek in modern times. It wasn't exploring anything new. It really was just what old Trek was with a shiny new sticker on it. And you might say, well, Eric, Orville had a shorter episode count than the older Star Trek stuff. And yes, you're right, they did. But I think the first season started out with, I think it was 14, then it was 12, then it was 10. I think something like that. But they didn't have to do anything new because their characters really were just stereotypes and copies of other types of characters in Star Trek. So you automatically felt familiar with those characters. So they didn't have to cover any new ground with them. And that's why it felt like it was very familiar to everybody. Whereas newer Star Trek is introducing new characters and new concepts, and they have to do all of that in a shorter episode count. Now, Discovery did have more episodes in the beginning, but as time went on, it got less. And then subsequently, other Star Trek shows got less episode counts in the newer era. Anyway, I think that it's people don't want to accept that media consumption has changed, and even the studios aren't going to get it right every single time. Not every single thing that comes out is going to be a 10 out of 10. Not everything that comes out is going to be perfect. Not everything that comes out is going to be groundbreaking. That's just the reality of it, and we have to pick and choose what we're going to like and what we don't like, and sometimes that means not watching or not supporting something in a franchise that we typically enjoy because it isn't the flavor that we actually like. So you go into a restaurant and it's got a lot of things on the menu, but there's a couple of items you don't want to eat. That doesn't mean that you hate the restaurant. It doesn't mean that you'll never eat there again. It simply means when you go to that restaurant, you're not going to order a couple of things on the menu, and that's okay. Those other items on the menu are for other people, and that's what Star Trek is. It's a nice, glorious restaurant with a lot of different options, and you don't have to eat every single one of them. You say the reason female characters like Rey, Captain Marvel, She-Hulk, Batwoman are hated because of sexism and misogyny. However, strong characters that happen to be female, like Jean Grey, Storm, Neytiri, Scarlet Witch, Hermione Granger, Toph, Katniss Everdeen, just to name a few, are loved by everyone, whether male or female. Seems the reason they're hated isn't because they have vaginas. It's more like they're written as one-dimensional, bitchy, and annoying. So it's really interesting. You did my work for me in this comment. Okay? So yeah, you're mentioning 4 more recent iterations of women in media. And then you're going back and you're naming characters like Katniss Everdeen. Now, Katniss is really interesting because Katniss is part of the reason we have the large amount of women in lead roles of shows right now because of stuff like the Hunger Games. You go back to that era, the Hunger Games taught Hollywood that people want to see women in lead roles in bigger ways. And so they started greenlighting a bunch of stuff with women in it because they wanted to, it's capitalism. They wanted people to come in and buy all of their stuff, watch all of their stuff, get tickets to all of their things. They wanted to follow that trend of what the Hunger Games was. So we saw this explosion of women being represented in media after that era. And you'll think of stuff like 2016 Ghostbusters and, like you said, Captain Marvel and things like this. You see all of that popping up. And a lot of that was because they saw an opportunity to corner that market and to get women to come into movie theaters. And so that's why we saw this. That's why it happened in the first place. And you name general characters like women from the past, like Jean Grey and Storm, and act like they're universally loved. You can look at the more recent X-Men movies and see that that's not the case. You can see that these same characters in a more modern setting get treated the same way all women get treated in media now. It's the same way. Go and read comments on Storm from the more recent X-Men movies, or Jean Grey from the more recent X-Men movies. Look at the discourse over Scarlet Witch. I mean, are you kidding? Are you being serious right now? Are you like, there's constant fighting about those characters. And wait until we see Toph in the Avatar live action series. We're going to see people complaining about that too. There is a shift in the way outrage is farmed online after we see women more represented in media. Once we see that happen and we see opportunities given to women, there's this shift where men start complaining about women specifically, and all of them are bad. You can't tell me, you can't sit here and be honest with me and go, there's no clear bias going on here when it comes to men and women in media. You can't say that. It's just not. Like, explain to me how it is that men can go for decades and decades and decades and have bad movie after bad movie after bad show after bad show, but you never see any discourse about whether or not men are capable of being good in media the way women are treated, the opportunities that women are given. Women automatically have to be perfect, 10 out of 10, no issues whatsoever for anyone to accept them. If you have a woman that's a little bit snarky, somebody's going to complain. You have a woman that has a little bit of like this power fantasy, people are going to complain. You have a woman that doesn't look exactly the way men want her to look, people are going to complain. Women in media, especially in lead roles, are held to a different standard than men. That is just the reality of it. That is just the reality of the situation. So what you're doing here is you are making the point without understanding that you're making the point, without recognizing that you're making the point. And Katniss it's a very interesting thing that you mentioned Katniss, when that really was, the Hunger Games were the catalyst for a lot of the women that we have right now because of how popular that was when it came out. It was a turning point, actually, for women in movies. So that's funny. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms has a lot of chuds excited, but they just keep saying it's not woke and that's why it's good. I saw your Twitter when you talked about it. Can you explain what you meant? Okay, so let me find, that's a tweet from, I think a few days ago. Let me check that, see if I can find it. All right, so here's the tweet that I responded to. It's from Literature Devil. This person. Haven't talked about him a lot. Very aware of who it is. Responding to one of our favorites, Nerdrotic, who says, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms delivered a gut punch last night in all the best ways. It's astounding in this current era of Hollywood we get something this good. And I'm not going to disagree. I think A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is really good. I don't have an issue with the show. I think it's not perfect. There's some issues with it. But overall, I had a good time with it. And just saw the finale today. Thought it was really strong. And this is what Literature Devil says. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, non-woke, traditional heroic character, no Marvel quips, no forced diversity, highly successful anyway, coincidence. And my response to this was, none of this is what made the show good. Like a checklist, a literal checklist of things that you do not want in a TV show or movie is the exact projection that you put on my community, the community that would like to see stuff like this, is the exact projection you put on our community when you don't like something that we've made. You do this checklist. I don't go through, when I'm watching a movie or TV show, I don't make a mental checklist of how many gay people there are in it, how many trans people, how many black people, how many women. I don't make those checklists. This is what these guys do, which is why it's all projection. Non-woke. Who gives a fuck? Like, who really gives a fuck? Honestly. Who cares if it's non-woke? Which, by the way, there is a part in the series where the white guy saves a woman of color from an authoritarian house. So, I mean, traditionally heroic character, I don't even know what that fucking means. We have a lot of characters that follow this, like, heroic path. It's not unique to the show. No Marvel quips. There was humor. There were shit jokes, there were pee jokes, there was humor. There was more humor in A Night of the Seven Kingdoms than there has been in the entirety of Game of Thrones. This one season has more humor in it than any of the other Game of Thrones projects we've had. So I don't. Okay, bro, whatever. No forced diversity. I want to reiterate this. There's no such thing as forced diversity in the sense of including diverse people into a world that they exist in. Like, they want to use forced diversity in a way that means any type of diversity that they don't think is appropriate to be there. But that just means that they don't see diversity as something that is accepted or allowed into the media. It's very gatekeepy. It's like, this is our media, we're going to gatekeep it, so we don't want any diversity in it. Totally ignoring the fact that diversity has always existed and they never had a problem with it until now, when people are actually happy to see themselves reflected in stuff. So I don't even understand what the fuck forced diversity means in this sense. Highly successful anyway. So in spite of all of these things, the show was successful, even though I just laid out for you how ridiculous these claims are. It's so silly. All right, with that being said, we're going to wrap up the video. Thank you guys for all of your questions and comments. If you don't see yours here, chances are it's going to be in the members only video. If you would like to see that, you can simply click join or the plus button down below to go check out that video. Again, anything that's not here gets included in that, unless it is inappropriate for YouTube. Otherwise, it is there. So thank you guys so much for submitting this. Starting next week, all AMA videos will be on Mondays moving forward. So you'll get a AMA video and an AMA members only video every single Monday moving forward. So that'll be considered season 2 of the AMA. There'll be a new question link down below. So if you would like to submit, you can start off that season 2 list. Simply go there and do what you see, or leave a comment or a question for me to respond to here on video. With that being said, thank you guys so much for hanging out today, and we will see you tomorrow with some more content. Take care.